My mom kicked me out to make room for her new family, then had the audacity to demand college money from my siblings after she found out I was successful. To give you some background, my mother had me when she was 20. My biological father was never in the picture. She told me he never wanted kids, and because they had only been dating for a few months when she got pregnant, she gave him the choice to leave, and he took it. She said they had such a bitter breakup that she chose not to pursue child support, and he also refused to pay. For both of them, it was easier to never speak again. Thankfully, my grandparents were incredibly supportive. Their help and encouragement allowed my mom to finish her education and find a job. She dated a few different men while I was young. When I was about 8, she started dating Harry, a co-worker. They were together for over 3 years before they got married. Harry and I were never super close, but we got along well enough to live together. 4 years into their marriage, my mom got pregnant. Everyone was thrilled, including me. Looking back, I probably should have seen what was coming, but I was so focused on the idea that my mom would always be there for me. I hoped that after all the struggles she went through raising me alone, she wouldn't abandon me now. After she married Harry, she started to distance herself from me, and we began to drift apart. I assumed it was just a phase and things would get better. During her pregnancy, I tried my best to be a supportive daughter, but it seemed like every time I was around, she'd get angrier. To avoid upsetting her, I decided to make myself scarce. But I guess I wasn't scarce enough. 6 months after she gave birth to twins, she and Harry sat me down for a serious talk. They told me they couldn't keep me in the house anymore because they now had 2 children to take care of. Since I had just turned 16, they couldn't legally kick me out without getting into trouble. They tried to justify their decision by highlighting the financial strain of supporting a large family on their modest income. This was absurd, as we had been living comfortably before this. I honestly didn't see how it would be difficult to support 2 adults, 1 teenager, and 2 babies on the salaries of 2 web engineers. It was clear they just wanted me gone. I really didn't want to leave, so I tried to offer solutions. If money was the problem, I told them I would get a job. But my mom said she wanted to save all her money and resources for the twins, who deserved it more than I did. She literally said they deserved to be with them more than I did, not that they needed it more. That was all it took for me to realize I had to leave. It was obvious that no one wanted me there. They knew I had enough self-respect to leave if I felt unwanted, and they had given me the perfect nudge. Their strategy worked. They hadn't technically evicted me, but I consider it the same thing. They had created a situation where I felt like I had no other choice but to go. I left that day and went straight to my grandparents' house. My grandparents were upset with my mother's actions, but they didn't cut her off because they wanted to be there for the twins. At 16, I got a part-time job because I knew I couldn't rely on my aging grandparents for financial support. I would occasionally see my mom and Harry when they'd visit my grandparents with the kids, but they rarely asked about me. They were always very formal, as if they didn't miss me at all. In fact, they seemed happier without me around. It made me sad to see my mom's temper had improved, but I knew there was nothing I could do. I lived with my grandparents until I was ready to go to college. My mom wasn't involved in my life then, either. I had to rely on friends to help me get settled in my dorm since my grandparents weren't healthy enough to help. My mom and Harry refused, saying they wanted to save money for the twins' future. So I took out a student loan, and one of my relatives co-signed for it. Fortunately, my uncle agreed to help, but only if I promised he would never be held responsible for any of the costs. I worked all through college to ensure I never fell behind on payments and to give myself a financial head start. My mother and I barely spoke once I started college. My grandparents were the only ones there when I graduated. My mother didn't even congratulate me. After college, I got a job and lived on my own to avoid being a burden to my elderly grandparents. I didn't make much money the first few years, but I was able to pay for groceries, utilities, and rent. I even started to pay off my student debt and save money for my future. I was living on a shoestring budget, but things eventually got better. It took time, but I climbed the ranks at my company. I'm proud of how far I've come with so little help, and I'm now in a very comfortable position. Unexpectedly, my mother found out I was doing well financially, even though we hadn't spoken in years. I'm nearly 33, and I'm in a senior management position at the same company where I started my career. I got a big promotion about 4 months ago, and I wanted to keep it private, so only a select few people knew. I did tell my uncle, though, as a way of thanking him for co-signing my loan all those years ago. From what I understand, he recently ran into my mom and Harry at a family gathering. He encouraged her to reach out and congratulate me on my success. I'm sure he meant well, but it backfired. She never even contacted me to say congratulations. My mom eventually found out about it and recently showed up at my home with Harry, insisting we talk. I should mention that I hadn't spoken to her since I went to college. I had blocked her everywhere and cut her out of my life, seeing no point, in hoping she would ever change. She didn't seem to notice my absence, and honestly, I doubt she even cared. My grandparents were the only ones who stayed in touch, but they knew I didn't like talking about my mother and avoided the subject. I hadn't stayed in close contact with my uncle either, so I was unaware that my mom and Harry had been having financial problems for a few years. I only found out when they showed up on my doorstep and told me how bad things had gotten. It was wishful thinking, but the only reason I let them in was that I hoped they were there to apologize. They started by saying they'd heard from my uncle about my promotion and how I was one of the youngest people to hold such a prominent position at my company. Instead of congratulating me, they seemed surprised that I had kept it a secret from them. I was taken aback that they expected me to communicate with them at all, much less share positive news. They were also upset that I had cut them out of my life. They claimed it was only because they had prioritized their children over me. They said I should have been old enough to understand their rearranged priorities and not hold a grudge. They insisted that as a teenager I should have supported their decisions instead of moving in with my grandparents. I don't even know why they thought I would agree with their choice to kick me out. They tried to gaslight me into thinking I was the bad guy for being angry that they had effectively ejected me to have some time alone with their kids. This is how they began our reunion after all these years. They talked about how hard the last several years had been for them without even letting me get a word in. They had started their own business, but it had failed, and they were now trying to recover from the losses. They were desperate for money because the twins were nearing college age. It was then that I saw the real reason they had come. They needed money. They didn't waste any time getting right to the point. They even tried to sugarcoat it by saying I could make it up to them by paying for my siblings' schooling. I was stunned by their attempt to make it sound like they were doing me a favor by letting me pay for the college education of 2 kids I didn't even know. I immediately told them I would not be doing that and that it was disrespectful for them to think they could coerce me. I became angry and reminded them that they were the reason I had to work through college and pay for my own education. They had refused to help me financially back then because they wanted to save for their real children, who they believed deserved it more than I did. I told them they had no right to expect anything from me now, especially financial support, since I had never questioned their choice to put the twins first and had simply left them alone. I pointed out that instead of trying to manipulate me, they could use the same money they had wished to save for the twins' college funds. I had nothing else to say, so I asked them to leave. I was foolish to have invited them into my home in the first place, assuming they might have come to apologize for how they treated me. When I insisted they leave, they became irritated and tried to shift the blame. They told me I wasn't innocent in the situation, claiming I had been over-enthusiastic, over-involved, and often irritable when we lived together. I couldn't believe this was a real issue they had with me, as I was just a teenager trying to stay connected with my family as they pushed me away. They then had the nerve to say I was no better than them because I had denied their request. They said I was forgetting all the years my mother had taken care of me and raised me alone. They claimed this was my chance to make it up to her, but instead, I was being rude and ungrateful. I was a child at the time, so I thought it was absurd they would even bring that up. Even if I had wanted to, I couldn't have chosen not to rely on them. Furthermore, it wasn't like they had helped me. They had pushed me out of the house as soon as they thought I was mature enough to handle things on my own, and for the last 18 years, they had refused to acknowledge my existence. I was still in shock that they had the nerve to expect me to help them now, as if I owed them something after everything that had happened. During the argument, things became very personal and ugly. I finally threatened to call the police if they didn't leave my property. After more arguing, my mother reminded me of all the sacrifices she had made when I was younger, supposedly because she wanted to be a good mother, before they finally left. She then claimed that I was painting her as the villain rather than the other way around. Ever since, this has been bothering me. I've been struggling to figure out if I'm to blame, if I've been expecting too much from my mother, or if she's just gaslighting me. I decided to post on Reddit to get some unbiased opinions. The question was, AITA for not paying for my half-sibling's college tuition just because my stepdad and estranged mother are having financial difficulties? Even though my uncle had great intentions, I reminded him that what he did was wrong and unacceptable. His actions undoubtedly had a negative effect. I wouldn't be in this predicament if he hadn't shared my life with my mother and disclosed my contact details without my consent. He apologized profusely, stating that he was unaware of their financial difficulties and had no idea my mother would react this way. He admitted he had no business telling my mother about my life, and that if we had wanted to reconnect, we would have done so without his help. Since his heart was in the right place, I don't intend to cut him out of my life. I would have been much angrier if his intentions had been malicious. He simply made a mistake. Besides, I might not be in this comfortable financial situation at all if it weren't for him, as he was the only person willing to co-sign my loan application. I made sure to let him know that what he did was inappropriate, as I don't want to be a doormat, but I also didn't want to come across as ungrateful. I think I found a good balance, and we're doing great. I won't hold anything against him because I needed this closure. I also spoke with my grandparents about my mom's recent struggles. They believe I'm right and have promised to try and persuade her to change her mind. I realize they have remained in touch with my mom because they don't want to lose contact with their other grandchildren. They understand the struggles my mom's family is going through, but they don't think it's right or fair to put me through this. That's their position, and I believe it's a reasonable one. First update. Ever since we last spoke, nearly 9 days ago, my mother has taken it upon herself to remind me of all she did for me growing up. She probably sends me an email every other day to make me feel like I owe her something. It's not like she did me a favor by raising me alone. She was legally required to take care of me. I don't understand her point. She only raised me when it was convenient. She and her husband decided to kick me out as soon as I started to cause them trouble, citing the need to save money for the twins' future. Now that we're in the future and the twins are adults, I believe they should be relying on themselves, rather than wasting time trying to manipulate and guilt-trip me. Although I had been ignoring her emails, I decided to reply a few days ago. I reiterated everything I had written in my essay. As expected, she didn't take it well and once more called me ungrateful. I just informed her that name-calling wouldn't change the truth and that I no longer wanted any contact with her because she had been a bad mother. I blocked her email account after that, but she just created a new one to keep harassing me. She never did the same for me, so I blocked that one as well, and I'll keep doing so until she understands that I'm not here to feel sorry for her. To be honest, I'm glad we're finally having this discussion because I think it will end soon, and I'll have the necessary closure. The only reason I had even welcomed them into my house and spoken to them that day was because I was still clinging to the hope that maybe they had changed. Maybe they were there to congratulate me and make amends. However, talking with them made me realize they just aren't the kind of people who are capable of regret, guilt, or shame. After this, I've completely given up on ever making amends. It once again made me realize how self-centered and cunning they are. Second update. I think my mother showing up at my workplace earlier today was the most bizarre thing she has ever done. Fortunately, I wasn't working today, so she left quickly and didn't succeed in her endeavor. I was feeling a bit under the weather and decided to take the day off, and I'm so glad I did. If I had been there, she definitely would have caused a scene or done something to make me look foolish. The receptionist called me and told me my mom had arrived, wanting to see me and refusing to leave, even after being told I wasn't there. They put her on the phone with me, and I found out the truth. Even though I was already quite anxious about what she might do, I firmly told her that I was at home. I told her that if she tried anything at my place of employment, I would sue her until she was too ashamed to even send her children to college. I tried my best to sound intimidating, and I think it truly frightened her. It must have worked because she agreed to leave right away, provided I meet her in person. I reminded her that she couldn't afford a lawsuit at the moment, and that she wasn't in a position to be making demands. I also mentioned that if the situation worsened, my employer would not hesitate to sue her, and that would be a very different scenario because they wouldn't be as forgiving as I had been. She'd be better off just leaving quietly. After she gave the phone back to the receptionist, I didn't get any more calls or notifications about the incident, so I guess she left. I can't afford for this to happen again because that was undoubtedly a close call. I've decided to speak with a lawyer to find out what precautions I can take. She hasn't directly threatened me, so I'm not sure if this is enough to get a restraining order. But I still want to speak with an attorney to discuss my options. I just have to hope that this experience was unpleasant enough for her to consider leaving me alone. Third update, I guess I don't need to consider filing for a restraining order anymore, since I'm now certain we have grounds for one. When my mother arrived at my workplace last week, I was able to convince her to leave. However, in light of this week's events, I believe that a restraining order against her needs to be issued for everyone's safety. A few days ago, she was waiting outside my door when I got home from work. I immediately told her I didn't want to argue and that I would call the police if she didn't leave. As I was about to dial, she lunged at me and threw me to the ground, sending my phone flying out of my hands. She cursed at me and blamed me for everything that had gone wrong in her life while she tried to hit me. I was so taken aback by her insane behavior that it took me a while to react. However, because I work out consistently and am much younger than her, it was simple for me to overpower her when I did. Fortunately, all the shouting had alerted my neighbors, who called the police. They even came to my aid and restrained my mother as we waited for the cops to arrive. When the police finally showed up, I made the decision to press charges. She is currently in a lot of trouble. I've also discussed this with my attorney and requested a restraining order against her. I've been told that Harry has taken the children and moved in with his parents. I'm not sure if he intends to come back anytime soon. He apparently challenged her about her behavior and told her she couldn't continue acting this way. She also got into a fight with him, which seems to mean she has really lost it. I believe she finds it hard to accept that I'm doing well in life, but in all honesty, she is to blame for her own issues. I will not feel sorry for her. I'll have the restraining order in place soon. And since I'm making more money, I've already started thinking about moving into a larger home, as now seems like the perfect time. I'm going to start exploring my options. It's embarrassing to be related to someone like that, so I sincerely hope my mother gets the help she needs and learns to behave normally. She has also been nasty to my grandparents, who have told me they no longer want to be around her. The only person she can blame for everyone avoiding her is herself. Anyway, I'm not worried about it anymore. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.